songwriter's dying friend, a duet born by accident. Somewhere between the Beatles breaking up and disco taking over, 10 songs slipped onto the radio and never left. They weren't always the biggest hits of the decade, but they carried the biggest stories. Behind every one of these songs is a person who almost failed, or almost never got the chance at all. One was recorded in 10 minutes because the studio clock was running out. One was written the night before it was sung. If you remember even one of these from a car radio, a school dance, or your parents' record player, you're about to find out the story behind it you never knew. This is Pop Echoes. Let's count down 10 songs only true boomers will remember, and the people who lived them. Number 10, Blue Swede, Hooked on a Feeling. Bjorn Skifs was a Swedish nightclub singer fronting a backing band nobody outside Stockholm had heard of. In 1973, looking for a hit, Blue Swede did what struggling bands often do. They covered someone else's song. Hooked on a Feeling had already been a hit once, for B.J. Thomas back in 1968. It should have been a footnote. Instead, Skifs' band borrowed a strange, chanting intro from a little-known English cover version, and that four-word chant, Uga Chaka, became the whole reason anyone remembers the song at all. There was a problem, though. The original lyrics leaned on the language of addiction, and Blue Swede worried American radio stations would quietly ban it. So before release, they rewrote the risky lines, swapping addicted for something safer, hoping nobody would notice the substitution. Nobody did. The song shot to number 1 in the United States in 1974 and stayed there for 18 weeks, an almost unheard of run for what was, on paper, a cover of a cover. It made Bjorn Skifs an international star for exactly one song. By 1975, he'd already left Blue Swede behind to chase a solo career, and the band that gave the world Uga Chaka simply stopped existing. Skifs went on to a long career back home in Sweden, largely unknown to the American audience who'd once chanted his hook in every dorm room and diner. Decades later, a Marvel movie needed a song that felt like the 1970s, distilled into 2 minutes. And Hooked on a Feeling got a second life it never asked for. Not bad for a rewritten cover that almost got banned before it even got played. Carl Douglas, Kung Fu Fighting.
Everybody was Kung Fu fighting.
Carl Douglas wasn't supposed to be famous. He was a session singer hired in the summer of 1974 to record a serious ballad called I Want to Give You My Everything, a song everyone in the room expected to be a hit. That track ate up 2 hours of a 3-hour studio booking. What was left was 10 minutes and a producer named Biddu who suddenly realized they had no B-side. Biddu asked Douglas if he had anything lying around. Douglas did. A set of lyrics he'd scribbled after watching kids on a London street mimicking kung fu moves, riding the wave of Bruce Lee mania sweeping the world. Biddu wrote a quick melody on the spot, deliberately hamming up the grunts and chops because, as he later admitted, nobody takes a B-side seriously.
John, he said, here comes the big boss.
They recorded it in 2 rushed takes. Total time, 10 minutes. Then an executive at Pi Records heard the reel, stopped, and asked to hear the rest. When he got to the throwaway kung fu song, he didn't laugh. He flipped the single. The B-side became the A-side. Kung Fu Fighting went on to sell 11 million copies worldwide, hit number 1 across more than a dozen countries, and made Carl Douglas the first Jamaican-born artist to top the American charts.
In fact, it was a little bit frightening.
The ballad everyone had pinned their hopes on, barely remembered today. The song, built in the final 10 minutes of a session, meant to be thrown away, became one of the best-selling singles in music history, and Carl Douglas became one of pop's purest one-hit wonders, forever tied to a song he almost didn't get the chance to write. Number 8. Rupert Holmes, Escape. the Pina Colada song.
Tired of my lady, we'd been together too long.
Rupert Holmes had spent a decade in the music business as a songwriter, arranger, and producer for other people, with almost nothing to show for it under his own name. In late 1979, flipping through the classified personal ads in a New York newspaper, he had an idea. A bored man answers a stranger's ad looking for excitement, only to discover, on the date, that the stranger is his own girlfriend, also looking to escape the very relationship they're both stuck in.
Took out a personal ad.
He wrote the entire song the night before he was scheduled to record it. The now famous opening line almost wasn't about pina coladas at all. It originally referenced Humphrey Bogart, until Holmes, minutes before the tape started rolling, decided he'd leaned on old movie references one too many times in his career. He swapped it for a tropical cocktail almost as an afterthought. That single last-minute change became the reason the entire song is remembered by a name Holmes never gave it. The vocal take that made it onto the record wasn't even meant to be final. Holmes recorded a rough guide vocal, planning to redo it properly the next day, but when he tried to re-record it correctly, he couldn't recapture the spontaneous energy of that first imperfect take. His producer agreed, "Keep the first one."
So I waited with high hope.
That happy accident became a #1 hit, closing out 1979 and opening 1980 at the very top of the charts. For years afterward, record store clerks had no idea what customers meant when they asked for that Pina Colada song, because officially, it wasn't called that at all, until the label gave in and put the nickname right on the label.
And she walked in the place.
Holmes has joked that he could rescue an orphanage from a fire and still be remembered as the Pina Colada guy. Some escapes, it turns out, you never really get to make. Coming up, a band born out of two broken hearts at the same Hollywood party, and the line they almost didn't sing out loud. Number 7, Player, Baby Come Back. Peter Beckett had crossed an ocean for this. A guitarist from Liverpool, he'd moved to Los Angeles chasing a music career, dragging a marriage along with him that couldn't survive the move. While he was on the road, his wife stopped waiting for him at the airport. He came home to an empty gate and, not long after, an empty marriage.
Everything about you. Baby, come back.
At a party where he showed up underdressed by mistake, he met a Texan songwriter named J.C. Crowley, who'd just been through a painful breakup of his own. The two men had nothing in common except heartbreak, and that turned out to be enough. Within days, they were writing together, and one of the very first songs to come out of it was a raw, aching plea addressed to nobody in particular and everybody at once, "Baby, come back."
Baby, come back. Any kind of.
They formed a full band around the song, borrowing their name, Player, from the closing credits of a movie neither of them can quite agree on today. Listen closely to the final chorus, and there's a moment where the instruments drop out completely, leaving Beckett alone on a confession that trails off before he finishes the sentence. He never says exactly what he can't live without doing, an unintentional gap some listeners have read as something far darker than heartbreak. Whatever the truth of that line, the song became an instant #1 in January 1978, turning 4 unknown musicians into overnight stars almost nobody had heard of 6 months earlier. It didn't last. Internal disputes, record label pressure, and the shifting sounds of a new decade pulled Player apart by the end of the following year, with Crowley leaving for a solo country career not long after. Two broken hearts had written one perfect song, but they couldn't write themselves a happy ending to match it.
I just can't live without you.
Number 6, Debbie Boone, You Light Up My Life.
The dark, but now you've come.
Debbie Boone grew up in the shadow of a famous name. Her father, Pat Boone, had been a chart-topping teen idol 2 decades earlier. Her grandfather, a country music legend. By 1977, Debbie was 21, touring gospel songs with her sisters, with no reason to believe she was about to record the single biggest hit of the entire decade. You Light Up My Life was composed for a movie of the same name, and the original vocal track was recorded by a different singer entirely, a soprano whose voice was dubbed over the film's lead actress. When creative disagreements pulled that singer off the project, the producers needed someone new, fast, and someone able to match phrasing already locked into an existing orchestral recording they didn't want to redo.
When it feels so.
Debbie Boone got the call almost by circumstance. Nobody, including Boone herself, expected what happened next. The song didn't just reach number 1, it stayed there for 10 consecutive weeks, a record no single had ever held before on the Billboard chart. It became, by the numbers, the single biggest hit of the entire 1970s, earning Boone the Grammy for Best New Artist over artists with far longer resumes, while the film it came from was largely forgotten by critics and audiences alike. The song outlived the movie, outlived the moment, and turned a 21-year-old into a name that outshone her own famous father, at least for one unforgettable stretch of 1977. Boone would go on to build a long career in country and Christian music, but nothing would ever match those 10 weeks at the very top. Before we go any further, if stories like these are hooking you the way they hooked us, hit subscribe and stick around, because the next 4 are where things get heavier. Number 5, Vicki Lawrence, The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia.
He was on his way home from Candletop, been 2 weeks gone and he thought.
Before she was Mama on television screens across America, Vicki Lawrence was a young cast member on The Carol Burnett Show, married to a songwriter named Bobby Russell. In 1972, Russell wrote a dark, tangled Southern murder ballad and pitched it around town, and every artist he offered it to turned it down flat. He didn't even believe in the song enough to record a proper demo himself.
It's too small for Andy to make.
Lawrence disagreed. She thought the song was a hit and recorded the demo herself, just to prove it. The song eventually made its way to Cher, whose husband and manager Sonny Bono rejected it, reportedly worried the story's dark themes might offend her Southern fans. With no one else left to sing it, the label turned to the one voice already attached to it, Lawrence's own, and released it as her debut single, credited to a comedian nobody expected to become a recording artist.
In Georgia, that's a night that they.
The song itself was a puzzle wrapped in tragedy. A man wrongly executed for a murder his sister actually committed, confessed only in the final twist of the last verse. It shouldn't have worked as pop radio. It went to number 1 anyway, and ironically, it climbed the charts right around the same time Lawrence and Russell's marriage was ending in divorce.
Sister don't miss when she aims her gun.
She would later joke that the song was the only good thing to come out of that marriage. It remained the only major hit of her recording career, eclipsed almost entirely by her decades on television as Thelma Harper. But for one song, one demo she refused to give up on, a comedy actress proved her own husband, and a superstar's manager, wrong about what audiences wanted to hear.
Back with a smile, said supper's waiting at home, and I gotta get to.
Number 4, Looking Glass, Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. Elliot Lurie was a Rutgers University student playing frat parties with 3 friends when Looking Glass came together in 1969. They built a reputation as a hard rock band on the New Jersey bar circuit, nothing like the soft, seafaring ballad that would eventually define them. Brandy wasn't even supposed to be the hit. It was released as a B-side, tucked behind another song the label expected to do the real work. Radio programmers thought differently. Brandy caught on, climbed the charts, and by the summer of 1972 was the number 1 song in America. A gentle story of a barmaid in love with a sailor who'd already given his heart to the sea. It sold over 1 million copies and pushed a band that saw itself as tough and gritty, into a soft rock identity they never fully embraced or felt comfortable wearing on stage. Success didn't hold the band together. Lurie left in 1974 to chase a solo career that never took off, and within a year, the rest of Looking Glass had splintered entirely, some members eventually reforming under a new name, chasing a harder rock sound that would later influence bands from Mötley Crüe to Twisted Sister. Lurie, meanwhile, walked away from performing almost completely, eventually becoming a music supervisor for major Hollywood films. Decades later, a Marvel movie soundtrack introduced Brandy to a generation who'd never heard of Looking Glass, streaming hundreds of millions of times over. Proof that a reluctant hit, born as a B-side from a band that didn't even want to be soft, can outlive every lineup that ever tried to follow it. The song that's coming next was almost sung by someone else entirely, until grief rewrote every word. Number 3, Terry Jacks, Seasons in the Sun.
My friend, it's hard to die.
The song began its life in a very different place than most listeners realize. Originally a French tune called Le Moribond, written by the Belgian songwriter Jacques Brel, it told the bitter story of a dying man saying goodbye to the wife who'd betrayed him. Sarcastic, dark, and far from sentimental. An English translation existed for years, but it never became a hit for anyone who recorded it.
We could reach with your starfish on the beach. We enjoy.
Terry Jacks, a Canadian musician who'd already had success with his wife in a duo called the Poppy Family, first tried to give the song to his friends in the Beach Boys. That attempt fell apart. Then real tragedy intervened. One of Jacks's closest friends, playing golf with him one afternoon, revealed he had acute leukemia and only months to live. He was gone within 4 months. Shaken, Jacks returned to the old song he'd once shelved and rewrote it almost entirely, transforming Brel's bitter farewell into something gentler, a peaceful goodbye instead of a broken-hearted one. He didn't do it for a paycheck. Jacks has said plainly that he felt uneasy profiting from a song written in memory of his dying friend, and that discomfort is part of why he largely stopped performing live not long after. Despite that, Seasons in the Sun became a massive #1 hit in 1974, eventually selling more than 10 million copies worldwide, one of fewer than 40 singles in history to ever reach that number.
Everywhere. Think of me.
What sounds, on the surface, like a soft, almost childlike goodbye is really a private act of mourning that millions of strangers unknowingly turned into a global hit. Jacks gave a dying friend the send-off he never got to hear, and the whole world hummed along without knowing the weight behind it. What's coming next split a nation before it ever hit #1.
We had seasons in the sun, but the hills that
Number 2, Paul Anka, You're Having My Baby.
you're having my baby. What a lovely way.
By 1974, Paul Anka was already a veteran, a teen idol from the 1950s, who hadn't topped the American charts in 15 years. He wrote, You're Having My Baby, as a personal tribute to his wife, who had already given birth to 4 of their 5 daughters, and the song was meant to be a simple, sincere celebration of family.
I can see it in your eyes, I'm happy.
Almost by accident, an unknown singer named Odia Coates happened to be in the studio during recording, and a label executive suggested turning Anka's solo track into a duet on the spot. The song became Anka's first #1 hit in a decade and a half, and simultaneously one of the most controversial songs to ever top the American charts.
Having my baby. You're the
The timing was impossible to ignore. Released barely a year after Roe v. Wade had legalized abortion nationwide, one line in particular, where the woman is thanked for not sweeping the pregnancy from her life, ignited outrage from opposite directions at once. Some feminist critics accused it of pressuring women through guilt. Some on the other side felt it politicized a private, personal love song. Anka has always maintained the song was simply about his own wife and family, with no political intention behind it at all.
But you wouldn't do it. No, you just wouldn't do it.
But the controversy stuck to the record permanently, and decades later it still shows up on lists ranking the most polarizing, and by some votes, the worst, songs ever to reach #1. Few artists have ever topped the charts and been simultaneously named the target of a cultural firestorm in the very same summer.
How much you love me. Having my baby.
It's a strange kind of legacy, a love letter to his own family that became, almost against Anka's will, a lightning rod in the culture wars of the 1970s. Proof that even the most personal song can become public property the moment it hits the airwaves. And now, the story that closes this list, a song about death that a man wrote in 15 minutes, and very nearly didn't survive to sing.
Know it. That you're having my baby.
#1, Norman Greenbaum, Spirit in the Sky.
Spirit in the sky. It's where I'm gonna go when I.
Norman Greenbaum grew up in a Jewish household outside Boston with no particular religious devotion and no gospel background at all. And yet, watching a country singer on television one night deliver an entire performance about dying and going to meet his maker, something clicked for Greenbaum. Not the theology, just the raw power of the idea.
Never been a sinner. I never sinned.
He sat down and wrote the words to Spirit in the Sky in about 15 minutes, a song about befriending Jesus on the way to the afterlife, sung by a man with no religious upbringing to draw from at all. Record executives weren't sure what to do with it. It didn't sound like anything else on Top 40 radio at the time, fuzzed out guitar, gospel harmonies, and lyrics about death from an artist nobody had pegged as spiritual. They were wrong to doubt it.
He's gonna recommend you to Spirit in the sky.
The song hit #3 on the Billboard chart in 1970 and sold over 2 million copies, becoming an anthem that outlived every trend it was never supposed to fit into, eventually appearing in more than 50 films and commercials over the following decades. Then, in 2015, life caught up to the song in the cruelest possible way. Greenbaum, then 72, was riding as a passenger when the car he was in collided with a motorcycle. The motorcyclist was killed instantly.
Ladies, that's the best.
Greenbaum was placed in a medically induced coma for nearly a month, critically injured, and not expected by doctors to survive. The man who'd written, almost as a throwaway idea, an anthem about facing death with peace, was now facing it for real. He survived. After weeks in rehabilitation, Greenbaum slowly returned to public life, later surviving a heart attack and cancer as well, and he still performs the song today when he can. A 15-minute lyric written by a non-religious man about the afterlife that ended up walking its author right up to death's door and back. Of every song on this list, none carries a stranger, heavier echo between the words and the life that followed them. If you lived through the 1970s, these songs weren't just background noise. They were the soundtrack to heartbreak, to grief, to falling in love, and sometimes to simply surviving a car ride home. The people who made them rarely got the recognition their stories deserved, until now. That's 10 songs, 10 lives, and 1 decade that shaped the sound of a generation. If this brought back a memory, a name, or a face you hadn't thought about in years, let us know in the comments, and subscribe to Pop Echoes for more music history you didn't know you needed.